live in a sexless marriage but you want to stay married, see a doctor, see a therapist, and start talking to your partner. Here are some of the steps therapists recommend to get a sexless marriage back in the bedroom. Talk to each other about your desires. Have fun together and share new experiences to remind yourself how you fell in love. Hold hands. Touch. Hug. Have sex even if you don't want to. Many couples discover that if they force themselves to have sex, soon it doesn't become work and they remember that they like sex. The body responds with a flood of brain chemicals and other changes that can help. Remember that there is no set point for the right amount of sex in a marriage. The right amount of sex is the amount that makes both partners happy. A prescription for a better sex life. If your sex life has waned, it can take time and effort to get it back on track. The best solution is relatively simple, but oh so difficult for many couples: start talking about sex. Just do it, have sex, even if you're not in the mood. Sex triggers hormonal and chemical responses in the body, and even if you're not in the mood, chances are you will get there quickly once you start. Make time for sex. Busy partners often say they are too busy for sex, but interestingly, really busy people seem to find time to have affairs. The fact is, sex is good for your relationship. Make it a priority. Talk, ask your partner what he or she wants. Surprisingly, this seems to be the biggest challenge couples face when it comes to rebooting their sex lives. The first two suggestions are self-explanatory, but let's take some time to explore the third step: talking to your partner about sex. Dr. Hatfield of the University of Hawaii is one of the pioneers of relationship science. She developed the passionate love scale we explored earlier in this guide. When Dr. Hatfield conducted a series of interviews with men and women about their sexual desires, she discovered that men and women have much more in common than they realize, they just tend not to talk about sex with each other. Here's a simple exercise based on Dr. Hatfield's research that could have a huge impact on your sex life. Find 2 pieces of paper and 2 pens. Now, sit down with your partner so that each of you can write down 5 things you want more of during sex with your partner. The answers shouldn't be detailed sex acts, although that's fine if it's important to you. Ideally, your answers should focus on behaviors you desire: being talkative, romantic, tender, experimental, or adventurous. If you are like the couples in Dr. Hatfield's research, you may discover that you have far more in common in terms of sexual desires than you realize. Here are the answers Dr. Hatfield's couples gave. Men: 1. Be more seductive, 2. Initiate sex more often, 3. Be more experimental, 4. Be wilder and sexier, 5. Give more instructions. Women: 1. Talk more lovingly, complimentary, 2. Be more seductive, 3. Be more experimental, 4. Give more instructions, 5. Be warmer and more involved. Let's look at what couples had in common. Both partners wanted seduction, instructions, and experimentation. The main difference for men and women is where sexual desire begins. Men wanted their wives to initiate sex more often and be less inhibited in the bedroom. But for women, behavior outside the bedroom also mattered. They wanted their partner to be warmer, helpful in their lives, and they wanted love and compliments both in and out of the bedroom. Well, get the best of well, with the latest on health, fitness, and nutrition, delivered to your inbox twice a week. Staying faithful. Men and women can train themselves to protect their relationships and raise their feelings of commitment. Can you predict infidelity? In any given year, about 10% of married people, 12% of men, and 7% of women say they have had sex outside their marriage. The relatively low rates of annual cheating mask the far higher rate of lifetime cheating. Among people over 60, about 1 in 4 men and 1 in 7 women admit they have ever cheated. A number of studies in both animals and humans suggest that there may be a genetic component to infidelity. While science makes a compelling case that there is some genetic component to cheating, we also know that genetics are not destiny. And until there is a rapid gene test to determine the infidelity risk of your partner, the debate about the genetics of infidelity isn't particularly useful to anyone. There are some personality traits known to be associated with cheating. A report in the Archives of Sexual Behavior found that 2 traits predicted risk for infidelity in men. Men who are easily aroused, called propensity for sexual excitation, and men who are overly concerned about sexual performance failure are more likely to cheat. The finding comes from a study of nearly 1,000 men and women. In the sample, 23% of men and 19% of women reported ever cheating on a partner. For women, the main predictors of infidelity were relationship happiness. Women who aren't happy in their partnership are twice as likely to cheat, and being sexually out of sync with their partner, a situation that makes women 3 times as likely to cheat as women who feel sexually compatible with their partners. Protect your relationship. 1. Avoid opportunity. In one survey, psychologists at the University of Vermont asked 349 men and women in committed relationships about sexual fantasies. Fully 98% of the men and 80% of the women reported having imagined a sexual encounter with someone other than their partner at least once in the previous 2 months. The longer couples were together, the more likely both partners were to report such fantasies. But there is a big difference between fantasizing about infidelity and actually following through. The strongest risk factor for infidelity, researchers have found, exists not inside the marriage but outside, opportunity. For years, men have typically had the most opportunities to cheat thanks to long hours at the office, business travel, and control over family finances. But today, both men and women spend late hours at the office and travel on business. And even for women who stay home, cell phones, email, and instant messaging appear to be allowing them to form more intimate relationships outside of their marriages. As a result, your best chance at fidelity is to limit opportunities that might allow you to stray. Committed men and women avoid situations that could lead to bad decisions, like hotel bars and late nights with colleagues. 2. Plan ahead for temptation. Men and women can develop coping strategies to stay faithful to a partner. A series of unusual studies led by John Lydon, a psychologist at McGill University in Montreal, looked at how people in a committed relationship react in the face of temptation. In one study, highly committed married men and women were asked to rate the attractiveness of people of the opposite sex in a series of photos. Not surprisingly, they gave the highest ratings to people who would typically be viewed as attractive. Later, they were shown similar pictures and told that the person was interested in meeting them. In that situation, participants consistently gave those pictures lower scores than they had the first time around. When they were attracted to someone who might threaten the relationship, they seemed to instinctively tell themselves, "He's not so great." The more committed you are, Dr. Lydon said, the less attractive you find other people who threaten your relationship. Other McGill studies confirmed differences in how men and women react to such threats. In one, attractive actors or actresses were brought in to flirt with study participants in a waiting room. Later, the participants were asked questions about their relationships, particularly how they would respond to a partner's bad behavior, like being late and forgetting to call. Men who had just been flirting were less forgiving of the hypothetical bad behavior, suggesting that the attractive actress had momentarily chipped away at their commitment. But women who had been flirting were more likely to be forgiving and to make excuses for the man, suggesting that their earlier flirting had triggered a protective response when discussing their relationship. We think the men in these studies may have had commitment, but the women had the contingency plan. The attractive alternative sets off the alarm bell, Dr. Lydon said. Women implicitly code that as a threat. Men don't. The study also looked at whether a person can be trained to resist temptation. The team prompted male students who were in committed dating relationships to imagine running into an attractive woman on a weekend when their girlfriends were away. Some of the men were then asked to develop a contingency plan by filling in the sentence, "When she approaches me, I will blank to protect my relationship." Because the researchers ethically could not bring in a real woman to act as a temptation, they created a virtual reality game in which 2 out of 4 rooms included subliminal images of an attractive woman. Most of the men who had practiced resisting temptation stayed away from the rooms with attractive women, but among men who had not practiced resistance, 2 out of 3 gravitated toward the temptation room. Of course, it's a lab study, and doesn't really tell us what might happen in the real world with a real woman or man tempting you to stray from your relationship. But if you worry you might be vulnerable to temptation on a business trip, practice resistance by reminding yourself the steps you will take to avoid temptation and protect your relationship. 3. Picture your beloved. We all know that sometimes the more you try to resist something, like ice cream or a cigarette, the more you crave it. Relationship researchers say the same principle can influence a person who sees a man or woman who is interested in them. The more you think about resisting the person, the more tempting he or she becomes. Rather than telling yourself, "Be good, resist," the better strategy is to start thinking about the person you love, how much they mean to you and what they add to your life. Focus on loving thoughts and the joy of your family, not sexual desire for your spouse. The goal here is to damp down the sex drive, not wake it up. 4. Keep your relationship interesting. Scientists speculate that your level of commitment may depend on how much a partner enhances your life and broadens your horizons, a concept that Dr. Aaron, the Stony Brook psychology professor, calls self-expansion. To measure this quality, couples are asked a series of questions. How much does your partner provide a source of exciting experiences?